Welcome to The Second Dawn. You're listening to The 100 Podcast, a show about CW's sci-fi series, The 100. I'm Daniel Prime.
Hallowed be his name. And I'm Olga, the first disciple. Today we're discussing Season 7, Episode 8, entitled Anaconda.
All right, this is a big one, guys. This is the prequel, spinoff, backdoor pilot. Second Dawn is the name of the show. Maybe. The Anaconda is the name of the episode. So this is a big deal. I really enjoyed it. But before we dive in, this is our first reaction to the episode. Basically, every week we watch the episode of The 100 and then immediately sit down and record. We don't even really know what each other thought of the episode yet. We just give our, what do we think of this? And then on Mondays, we do an audio podcast. That will be way more in depth. It will be on our website, the100podcast.com, or you can just search for the 100 Podcast on audio services. Mm-hmm. All right. What did you think of Anaconda?
I mean, I thought it was really good. Mm-hmm. Like, really good.
Yeah.
I was invested so quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think it was so skillfully done to get me to care about new people.
Yep.
And in a way, a world that we left behind in the last season of this show.
Yeah.
So just focusing back in on why I liked it so much. Mm. The performances were really strong.
Yep.
The characters, like their motivations, their backstories, their interpersonal relationships.
Yep.
And just like the ability to fill in blanks that have bugged me about the 100 lore and just like make me re-excited to explore this time period.
Yeah. I think a great thing about it is that it left me wanting more in a good way.
Yeah.
That it was like, oh, the hour's almost ending. Like, this is a bummer. Because I think the biggest success for me is that it's anchored in a really great protagonist. Mm-hmm. And that they just have such a great track record with finding these amazing actresses. Mm-hmm. We've talked about how the show, like every season, introduces someone new to fall in love with, whether it's Hope or Dioza back in the day, or Lexa wasn't there from the beginning. Callie, I think, is a great central figure. I think Bill, I keep wanting to say Cadigan, but now there's always Cadigans.
Good point.
Bill is a really strong antagonist, especially by the end of the episode. Mm-hmm. And I think they set up the conflicting dynamics really early on, and how like this is already a broken family, and there's history there, and there's an history to the world. When you compare it to like the pilot of The 100, it's just like night and day, and it shows you how much Jason is developed as a creator.
I will say, however, this isn't the pilot, so we still have time for a radioactive moment. You were saying to me that you wish that somewhere on the radio, Radioactive was playing, and someone was like, ugh, I hate this song, and like turned it off. Glad they didn't do that. They didn't need that Easter egg.
That's a great point, though. I'm going to use that as a jumping off point. It's not the actual pilot. So let's talk about what a backdoor pilot is and what this is exactly. Mm-hmm. So a backdoor pilot is when you have a show and you want to potentially do a spinoff. Mm-hmm. So you put an episode in the original show to sort of test the waters, see what critics think, see what you as a producer or executive is like, oh, does this actually work as its own thing?
Also, will fans who dropped off of the show return to see something new?
Yeah, does it keep, people skip that episode because they know it's basically, it's a light way of doing a pilot. Mm-hmm. Them, in theory, they pick it up and make an actual pilot that will not be this episode. Mm-hmm. It may contain elements. I don't know if they'll rework certain scenes or if maybe pieces of this. I wouldn't even be shocked if maybe pieces of this are like flashbacks or flash forward, whatever. But the point is, we don't know if this is going to be a show for sure. Mm-hmm. CW has done a number of backdoor pilots for spinoffs, especially of Supernatural, which went nowhere.
Yeah.
Hopefully this goes somewhere.
Yeah.
So that to me is the other big takeaway, which is I definitely want to see where this goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely went into this, and once we heard that there would actually be a backdoor pilot in the middle of this season, I think both of us were like, but why? We're like, but don't we know? I mean, we have apocalypse upon apocalypse.
Yeah.
Earth ends twice. Like, we get it. How much do we really need the origin of the clans? Mm-hmm. And I'm not actually 100% sure if I still, like, need it.
Yeah.
But I care enough about these characters, and I feel like it's going to be interesting enough and exciting enough that I want to watch that.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that I leave feeling a little bit conflicted about is I don't really feel like, even though I liked this episode and I like the characters that it set up, I don't feel like it necessarily did the job that I was expecting it to do, which is to give me a slice of what is this show going to be week to week. Because the main dynamics and issues in this episode were centered around the family and centered around living in the bunker and Becca, right? And so now Becca's dead.
Yeah.
Bill leaves.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to say that he can't come back, but like, he can't ultimately be defeated. We know that much, right? Because he ends up in the 100. So, you know.
Well.
The mom maybe dies. It's a little unclear. But
she puts on a hazmat suit, so she's still in play.
Okay, so she's still in play. But my point being that, like, a lot of the core issues are things that are, like, a moot point going forward in the series. The series really is about, like, okay, now we're out of the bunker. What do we do now? And I don't leave this episode knowing, is that a story I care about seeing? I care about the dynamics of that family, and I care about Callie as a character, and obviously it seems like Reese is going to be sticking around too.
Yeah.
But like, do I care about the beginning of the Grounders? Now, especially that we have the answer about the language, and we have little hints like what Tree Crew started out as. Do we need to... Like, I don't know.
So, I mean, again, it really is interesting because they talk about how the unification of the clans, that doesn't even take place until it's like Shadehead Lexa times.
Yeah.
So is it really going to be about like the clans facing off, or is it really just going to focus in on Tree Crew? Of the disciples left in play, only Reese and Tristan have the blood modification. So the rest of them went on the bridge and disappeared. So it's not even like Tree Crew versus the disciples anymore. Yeah. So it's not even just like the bunker's over. It's like Second Dawn isn't even really like that much of a factor.
Yeah.
Unless somehow some of the other Second Dawn disciples that weren't level 12s or level 12s survived. But we've seen the level 11 bunker and they were all dead. So, you know.
So that's the thing, is that it didn't really set up the core like issues of what the real Second Dawn show will be. Because it's about them starting a new civilization, but and yes, you can say Reese, that one of the dynamics is that Reese is trying to get the flame from her, but we know he doesn't succeed or at least he certainly doesn't succeed in bringing it back to Bill.
Right.
So, I don't know. Prequels are weird.
They are. You know, just another thing. Like, we both kind of expected, even within this episode, that Callie would put the flame inside of her own head. So, in a way, it's almost like, who will be the next commander? Yeah,
and I think that is cool that they didn't have her put it in her head, because that does create more questions of, we assume that's where it's going. But because they didn't show it to us, maybe it isn't.
She's the first flame keeper.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're still left with a lot of questions like, you made a good point about how all the clans spread out. So do all the clans come from... Well, but they say, we have a bunch more doses.
2,000 doses.
Yeah, so we can find other people and stuff like that. So that's interesting. But also, there's the big question of how do they go from Becca Promheta and Callie, who are both very science-based, to believing in this whole reincarnation, tech is bad.
Maybe Reese and Second Dawn do have more to do with it, although Second Dawn also seems like very educated to be, and like important. The people who were in that bunker were important, but maybe to control the rest of the masses, you have to lift yourself up and push everyone else down.
It's fascinating.
We still have these questions.
Yeah, there's definitely questions to be had, and the point is that they're great at doing characterization, and we don't know what happens to any of these characters.
Yeah.
So in that way, there's plenty to go forward with. Also, the other big question I have is, what happened to the stone?
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Because obviously the stone doesn't stay in that bunker. And so do they move it? It seems like at this point it's pretty obvious that the one on Earth is the one that's deactivated now.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did that happen? Does Bill pop back and forth? Do any of the other disciples pop back and forth? I mean, here's the thing: it is possible that they come back and forth because they're trying to get the flame a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to me being like, yeah, but you can't really resolve that issue on Second Dawn, the show, because of the fact that he's now the big bad of the 100.
Yeah. How interesting is it to watch Cadogan interacting with his children and his ex-wife and trying to convince them, if we see him here having presumably been defeated, or maybe the only thing in time travel is a factor of something, is that he will be sent back in time to Earth, and then we have a little fun paradox, or he exists in two places at the same time.
So I assume when you bring up time travel, you're referring to the big white light.
Yes.
Do you think that is time travel?
That's a great question. In a way, all right, so Becca calls it Judgment Day, right?
Yeah.
The real Judgment Day, the big one.
The big one.
I'm like, listen, we've had a lot of big Judgment Days, it feels like.
Judgment Day.
Clark has done a lot of judging. Everyone's a judgmental person.
We're very judgmental in how we talk about the show.
Extremely. So to me, it's what can Judgment Day really be? Is it really just another war? Is it really just another explosion? Maybe it's time travel and the quantum abyss.
I honestly, that's the thing, is I don't feel like I have a better handle on where we're going after this episode than I did when I started the episode. Yeah. And I'm kind of okay with that, but I'm definitely what the heck was that? Because what was the flashing light? So I guess you could argue, hey, maybe it is time travel. She went to that final day. And then she comes back, which could also be kind of cool, because that could mean that we could end up seeing Becca in the present of the 100, if we see where she went to and then comes back.
Again, I'm she's kind of in a way in the same boat as Cadogan, where I'm but how, or what? How does that add to the show, or
because she can do because of the fact that it's time travel, she could have been she could spend 2 years on our timeline then come back to that exact point.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, I'm just throwing things out there.
I mean, that's fair.
So the big two things people have talked about before this episode is, does the last war and stuff lead to talking about time travel, or a simulation idea? Is this all a simulation and the key is what gets us out of the simulation?
Yeah.
Does this in any way lean you towards the simulation idea, or no?
I don't think it leans me towards the simulation.
Yeah.
Then again, it technically doesn't really lean me towards time travel either. Yeah. And that just feels
Well, he went somewhere and then came back.
I guess.
He disappeared and came back. But that could
also be a physical space, and it's there's a supernova somewhere, and it's just expanding into our abyss, really wiping out everything.
It's just fascinating, because she's we're not ready for this yet, and I just
aliens, but they're already on an alien planet.
Yeah, well, they're not interacting with aliens. Yeah. I don't know. We also talked about is this have spiritual, actual spiritual things that we're going towards? Obviously, they keep talking about things that seem very Buddhist and transcendence and things like that, but the show doesn't seem like the kind of show that would actually go mystical.
Actually give us an idea of the afterlife.
Yeah. I'd have trouble buying that. It wouldn't be the first show to suddenly end with super religious overtones. But I mean, and obviously the show has had a bunch of religious overtones. But,
and I mean, cult leader too.
Yeah. But as far as confirming the mystic, it has overtones of the ideas of religion as an organization and how it affects people. But it leaves me with a lot of questions that I'm interested to see where they go with. We were talking about, we don't really know what this sets up for the rest of the season within the 100 itself.
I have to say, the important thing to me is that the promise of this prequel doesn't actually affect the ending of this season of the 100. So we're saying if Cadogan is still on the table, if Becca's still on the table, they just need to play whatever part they're going to play to fulfill season 7.
Yeah.
And if it so happens that to fulfill season 7, they can still somehow factor into the prequel, that's fine. But they can't like manipulate this season to me to make it so that they're still workable for the prequel.
I mean, it's fascinating.
I don't want to sacrifice one story for another.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you. I think that they have to land the plane with season 7 and make that all work. And they can't, like, overly put too much on the prequel because we don't even know if that's going to happen. Let's talk a little bit more directly about the prequel. Other than the main character of Callie, did you connect with other people? Who were you excited to see more of?
I guess I'm interested in August.
Yeah.
Because we really didn't get too much of him. And I am interested because I feel like he's the character who has the most like wiggle room of establishing him as a person.
Yeah.
And therefore, I kind of want to see him lose his like chipper spirit.
Yeah.
He's the person who seems the most optimistic. Like, I'm a musician, and yes, I just like lost someone who's important to me.
Yeah.
But I don't really know him emotionally. And therefore, I want to see him like face things emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like he did. He was losing his girlfriend the whole time. He was like frustrated.
He was freaking out, but then we see him later and he's just like, I'm on board for leaving.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that we saw him in that moment, but we haven't actually like engaged with him and his like thoughts the way we have with Callie and Reese.
Yeah. I think that's clearly the core dynamic.
Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed the dynamic of her versus Reese. And I loved the like ending of her shooting him in the shoulder. Like, that was a great moment for her. And I think that seeing him like keep doing what the dad wants, keep like the fact that he goes all the way to burning Becca and everything. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I wish they had given us like a little glimmer more of him being not just his daddy's boy.
Yeah.
Right? Like I wanted like one little scene where he makes like a small choice that goes against his dad, or some small choice that has some sort of free thinking within him. Because right now it was like, it was a little too one note for him.
Yeah. He is too much of a I don't even want to call him a stand-in for Bill, because he doesn't have any independent thought, and Bill's all about like the machinations of like the grander scheme of things. Yeah. So and again, I don't really know what part Reese plays, if he's like away from his dad and just like his only purpose is taking the flame, and that's it.
Well, and I'm sure that wouldn't last very long.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. I kind of think that in a way I overly gave him the benefit of the doubt with like fighting with his emotions when Callie wants to open the bunker again to let people in, because like after that moment, it feels like he super closes himself off to anything, but I don't even see him like really making that grand emotional choice either. It's like just that person who had tears welling up in his eyes was just like gone for the rest of the episode.
I think the thing about Reese, I mean, I do like the idea of him, like he's trying so hard to make his father care about him that he's willing to do anything, and he's kind of brainwashed. I like that. Like, he's doing all these bad things, but like I also see like complexity there because he's kind of brainwashed by his dad.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of that gets complicated when I'm like, but if the dad isn't there, is that character as interesting?
Right. So let's just take a step back into the family relationships that are still in play.
Yeah.
We have a sister, a brother, and a mom. I was concerned about how many dynamics could still be in play.
Yeah.
Because the 100 covered so many. Yeah. And like my sister, my responsibility, my brother, my responsibility was like such a big deal to the 100 Prime. That having this spinoff be about a brother and sister dynamic truly in focus as like the important, Prime, as like the important named characters. I just can't help but wonder.
That's already true, but
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like before, they are among the important other main characters. Here, it's like they're the main characters. And yes, again, we have a few other named people, but they are nowhere near as central.
Yeah.
So again, it's just this interesting question to me of like, how are they going to throw these morality questions at us that will feel new and fresh? And how will they reframe this kind of sibling relationship where one of them is kind of more morally questionable than the other? versus the 100.
Yeah, yeah. How do they make it fresh and not feel like a rehash of the Blakes is the simple version of what you're saying.
Thank you, yes. Yes.
I mean, obviously, it's not the same dynamic.
No, it isn't. Again, it's about the vying for the love of your parents.
Yeah.
It just...
Very different.
Very different.
Yeah. And we don't know even how long we're there. I mean, you have to extrapolate so much based on so little information that they give you here. And I think that is an ongoing thing where I'm like, I think I was going into this in probably the wrong mindset, because I was going into it thinking about it as though it was a pilot.
Yeah.
And if this was a pilot, I mean, if it was a pilot, it would be complicated, because I'd be like, well, I would assume Cadigan would show back up again and things like that. But like, if this was a pilot, I would say, they keep saying Tristan's name. Clearly, he's going to keep mattering.
Yeah.
He doesn't really do anything.
He's just
He doesn't have a personality.
No.
I don't leave this feeling like I understand what the prequel is.
Yeah.
And so I'm struggling, because I have a feeling people are going to be pissed off at me for these feelings.
Yes, but just in terms of, and not to harp on it in a negative way, but again, I mentioned their mom. She's a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
She's a psychoanalyst, but even so, she's a doctor who like trained Callie to also have some medical skills, and she's the parent who is still in play, and presumably like her daughter, who is like the keeper of the flame and is going to be helping distribute the Nightblood serum, is like in a leadership role as the daughter of Cadigan, who is everyone's leader. Like, how does Callie not feel like a Clark 2.0? Yeah.
I don't want to come off super negative about this, because I did really enjoy what I saw. I don't, and maybe it did just accomplish what it needs to do, which is make me interested. And maybe I'm putting something on it that it doesn't need to be, which is an actual pilot. But
that's our burden, I think. And I hope that enough people watch some recap videos about who Cadigan is and what's been going on in the last few seasons of The 100 to make it make sense and to maybe get their eyes back, because I want this to be picked up.
Yeah,
I want this to succeed.
Yeah. All right, there's obviously more to talk about, but I would, say we're going to put that into the audio podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please send us feedback in the comments down below, or email us at v100pod@gmail.com. Thank you, and may we meet again.
May we meet again.